The glass walls of Sterling Tower stretched up into the clouds, reflecting the city lights like a mirror of gold and silver. At the very top, in an office that could have been a palace, Alexander Sterling sat behind a mahogany desk that had once belonged to a European king. His world was a well-oiled machine, numbers on screens, contracts signed in leather-bound folders, deals whispered over glasses of vintage whiskey. He was a man who had clawed his way from nothing to the very peak of the financial world, a name that opened doors on every continent. And yet, on this quiet winter night, the city below roared with life while he felt nothing but the still ache of solitude. The knock on the door was hesitant, a sound that didn't belong in his empire of confidence. Clara, his longtime assistant, stepped in with an unusual tightness in her voice. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you. She refused to give her name, but she says it's urgent. She says, it's about your son." The word son sliced through the air like a sudden gust of wind. Alexander froze, his pen hovering above a document. Slowly, he set it down and looked up. "My son," he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of disbelief. "Yes," Clara said, shifting her weight uneasily. "Should I tell her to leave?" "No," Alexander replied after a pause. "Send her in." Clara left, and a moment later the woman stepped into the room. She was nothing like the polished socialites or boardroom negotiators who normally crossed his path. Her coat was worn, her shoes modest, her hair a little wind-tossed from the night outside. But it was her eyes, vivid green, sharp with a mix of pain and resolve, that rooted him to his chair. "Hello, Alex," she said softly, as though the years between them were a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. He stood slowly, his voice quieter than he expected. "Emily." 17 years seemed to fold in on themselves in an instant. He saw again the small Boston apartment where they'd spent long summer nights talking about art and ambition. She had smelled faintly of jasmine and turpentine back then, always with paint on her hands, always laughing at his sharp-edged dreams. Then came the offer that had changed his life: New York, investment capital, a chance to build something colossal, and when he left, she hadn't followed. No calls, no letters. Just a silence he had filed away under lost things. "I didn't expect to see you again," he said, more steel creeping into his tone. "What is this about a son?" Emily took a deep breath, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. "His name is Daniel. He's 16. He's yours." The air seemed to thin. "Mine?" he asked, almost incredulous. "Yes," she said firmly. "I didn't tell you back then because you were building your empire. I thought I could raise him on my own. I thought it was the right thing. But now," her voice faltered. "He's in trouble, Alex. I don't know what else to do." "What kind of trouble?" She pulled a folded paper from her bag and slid it across his desk. "He's been fighting. School suspension. The police got involved this time. They're threatening expulsion. He's bright, but he's angry. And I can't reach him anymore." Alexander's eyes fell to the paper. There was a mugshot-style photo attached to the report. The boy stared at the camera with dark, defiant eyes, his hair messy, his jawline unmistakable. Alexander felt something tighten deep in his chest. "You should have told me years ago," he said. "I know," she admitted, looking away. "But I can't change that now. I can only ask for your help." His silence stretched for several long seconds before he rose, reaching for his coat. "Where is he?" The police precinct in Queens was small, its air stale with the scent of burnt coffee. In damp coats. Daniel sat slouched in a plastic chair, earbuds in, his gaze darting up when Alexander entered. The boy's eyes flicked over him, curious but guarded, like a street cat deciding whether to run. "This your kid?" the officer asked. Alexander hesitated for the briefest moment before answering, "Yes." The drive to Emily's modest apartment was quiet except for the rain tapping the windshield. Daniel sat in the back, pretending to be absorbed in his music, but Alexander could feel the boy's eyes on him in the rearview mirror. When they reached the building, Emily murmured her thanks, but Alexander didn't leave immediately. "I want to see him again," he said. Emily looked wary. "Why?" "Guilt. Maybe," he said. "Or maybe because I'm not walking away a second time." The next weeks were a careful dance. Alexander invited Daniel to lunch at sleek restaurants, to basketball games, to the rooftop garden at Sterling Tower. At first, the boy kept his words clipped, his shoulders stiff, but Alexander didn't push. Instead, he listened. He learned that Daniel liked sketching, hated math, and didn't care for most of the music Alexander tried to share. He also learned the fights at school weren't random, they were about kids making comments about his mother, about not having a father. "You do now," Alexander had said quietly during one of their walks, though Daniel hadn't replied. Slowly, cracks began to appear in the boy's walls. He started texting, sometimes about homework, sometimes about nothing at all. Alexander found himself leaving board meetings early just to make a soccer game. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing Daniel smile, even if it was fleeting. But one night, just as spring rain began to soak the streets, Emily called with panic in her voice. "Daniel's gone. He left after an argument. He's not answering his phone." Alexander was already in his car before she could finish. They searched for hours, until finally they spotted him on the pedestrian walkway by the East River, hood up, shoulders hunched against the wind. "Daniel," Alexander called. The boy didn't move. When Alexander reached him, the city skyline glimmered in the distance, distorted by the wet sheen in the boy's eyes. "I don't fit anywhere," Daniel said hoarsely. "I'm not part of your world, and I'm just trouble in hers." Alexander crouched beside him, gripping his shoulder firmly. "You are my world. And hers. Money doesn't mean anything compared to you. I missed 16 years. I won't miss another day if I can help it." Daniel searched his face for a long moment, as if testing the truth in those words, before finally letting out a shaky breath. The months that followed weren't perfect, but they were real. Alexander started spending weekends in Emily's neighborhood instead of flying off to Europe. He and Daniel took short trips, to baseball games, to small-town art fairs where Daniel would sketch for hours. Emily began to look at Alexander with less suspicion, though there was still a guardedness in her eyes. The real shift came one summer evening when Daniel invited Alexander to see his school play. It was a small production in a cramped auditorium, the kind of thing Alexander had never made time for before. But when Daniel stepped on stage, Alexander barely noticed the peeling paint on the walls or the squeaky chairs. He only saw his son, confident, expressive, and more alive than he'd ever seen him. After the final bow, Daniel came running over. "Did you see me mess up that one line?" he asked breathlessly. Alexander smiled, pulling him into a rare embrace. "I saw you own the stage. And I've never been prouder." They walked out together into the warm night, Emily joining them on the sidewalk. The city lights shimmered in the distance. And for the first time, Alexander didn't think about contracts or markets or the next billion-dollar deal. He thought about the way Daniel's laughter mixed with the hum of the streets. He thought about Emily's quiet smile beside him. All his life, Alexander Sterling had believed success was measured in wealth, in the size of his empire and the fear his name commanded in boardrooms. But now he understood there was another kind of fortune, one that couldn't be bought, traded, or measured on a spreadsheet. It was here, in second chances, in unexpected family, in the unshakable bond that had grown between a man and the son he'd never known. And for the first time, Alexander Sterling, the man who had everything, knew he was truly rich.